Okay. Hello, 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 everyone, and welcome to another amazing edition of Ask Dr. Michael Dansinger. He's a world renowned diabetes reversal expert. You can go to diabetesreversalpartners.com to learn more about him. And if you are in New Hampshire, Massachusetts, or Florida right now, insurance does cover time spent with Dr. Danziger to help you reverse your type 2 diabetes. Even if you're on the cusp at pre-diabetes, you definitely want to have your doctor make a referral to Dr. Danzinger to help you get back on the right track, because even one sugar molecule can wreak havoc on your arteries, leading to plaque buildup and ultimately peripheral artery disease, which is that poor circulation in the legs, as well as poor circulation in your heart, blockages in your coronary arteries. So definitely check out his website, diabetesreversalpartners.com. Also, don't forget to subscribe to his channel, to his YouTube channel at Michael Danzinger, MD. So, with that being said, welcome, Dr. Danzinger. We really appreciate you being here. I had this well thought out introduction all about genetically modified foods. And then I thought, you know what? Scrap it. I'm not going to do any more talking. I want to leave it to you. Let's just start with the very basics. Genetically modified foods. What is genetically modified? What does that actually mean? And what does it pertain to?
Thanks so much, Kim, for the opportunity to have this conversation today. It's a great topic. And GMO stands for genetically modified organisms. It's a hot topic. So what is it? So GMOs are mainly plants. So if you want your plant, if you're a farmer and you want your plant to be resistant to pests and herbicides, then you will use GMO seeds. And this has radically changed the
Yeah.
way we farm in the United States and what we eat, what's in our grocery stores. And that's the main link between GMO and nutrition. So imagine that you have a crop like corn and it doesn't grow well because there's so many pests that are eating the corn. If you can insert a gene into the corn that makes it resistant to pests, then your corn will grow better. That's the idea. And the crops that have benefited by by becoming resistant to pests or herbicides are mainly corn, soybean, canola oil, cottonseed oil, and sugar beets. Those are the leading GMO foods in the United States. And all of these foods are used in processed food, in snacks, and the grocery store shelves and the fast food restaurants are loaded with, corn and soybean oil or canola oil, cottonseed oil, and sugar, either from high fructose corn syrup or from sugar beets. So much of the process, 70 or more percent of the processed foods that people, ultra processed foods, have GMO ingredients in them. Also, corn is used and soybean is used to feed animals, cows, pigs, chickens, for example. And so those animals, farm animals, are eating about 80% of what they're eating is genetically modified corn or soybeans. And that, that's in the meat. And I will say that your body can't really tell the difference between genetically, if you ate a corn cob that was commercially grown with GMO versus commercially grown without GMO seeds, I don't think your body would necessarily be able to tell the difference nutritionally between those two types of corn, but the likelihood of people eating corn or things made of corn has increased in recent decades because now it's cheaper and easier to get corn and oil and soy and meat, which, eats that stuff. So that's sort of my introduction to how to think about GMOs and the effect that it's having on the American diet during the past recent decades.
Okay, so how might GMOs potentially impact? I mean, and I think I'm getting the idea, but how do you think that they might be impacting our insulin, our blood sugar, and leading to this diabetes epidemic that we've been experiencing, which ultimately is leading to peripheral artery disease?
Right. Well, let's start with sugar. So, sugar is not good for diabetes, right? It's like pouring gasoline on a fire. And Americans are eating more sugar than ever in our soft drinks, in our, processed foods. Sugar prices have been kept low because of advances in GMO technology, making corn and sugar beets less expensive. And so sugar, on the one hand, sugar is sugar, whether your body can't tell whether the sugar you're eating comes from genetically modified sources or not. But the likelihood that you're eating sugar, the number of pounds per year that Americans are eating of sugar, has gone up and up in part because of the GMO technology making it more affordable and you know prevalent in grocery stores. So processed foods are fueling the diabetes epidemic, and GMO technology has been fueling the processed food epidemic.
Um, some studies have suggested links between GMOs and faulty insulin regulation. Can you elaborate on any of this research or what we know about that?
So there may or may not be a little bit of research to
A little
suggest
bit.
things. It would need to be verified and replicated, and we don't we don't I don't think we know that much about it, but
Mm.
I don't think there's likely to be much there. There might be some animal studies that hint in that direction. I don't think that's where the action is. I don't think that that's likely to be a major clinically important insight.
Okay.
Like, it's a great question. You can tell I just don't think there's much there.
One of the things I think most people don't know is that there are some benefits to GMOs, and you mentioned pest control, right? When it comes to, or pest, should I say, resistance,
Yep.
such as with the corn and some of the other crops. But also, insulin is a product of GMO.
So, like all technology can be good. Some people would say all technology can be used for good or evil. And although that's an oversimplification, it's not that technology is necessarily a bad thing. It's how we use it. And many forms of technology are mixed. They have unintended consequences, and they might have obvious benefits up front, but it's a mixed bag. A great success story for GMO is making insulin available to people who need it for diabetes
Mhm.
treatment. And so, 50 years ago, insulin, especially in type 1 diabetes, but anyone who is using insulin injections was getting insulin from animals. And then GMO technology made it possible to insert the human gene for insulin into bacteria or yeast. And now in all the insulin used is human insulin, but it's from genetically modified organisms creating insulin through these advanced processes. So this insulin is identical to the insulin that the human body makes, and it's perfectly good for treating diabetes. It's definitely a step up from animal insulins, which are inferior for treating human diabetes. So that's a success story for genetic modification.
Is there any difference? This might not be the most intelligent question, but is there a difference between genetic genetically made and genetically modified, or are they kind of one and the same? And the reason I ask that question is because we have all of the beyond meats, beyond burgers, all this meatless um, food that is now coming about that's literally created in a lab. Where would those items
Right.
fall?
So many of those are the result of genetically modified advance, the genetic modification. So um, the especially soy, but also heme, which is a molecule found in some um, genetically modified in some of the newer meat alternatives. And these meat alternatives are many of them have helped people with vegetarian, who are looking to eat less meat for personal reasons or nutritional reasons to replace ground beef with the meat alternatives. And in many cases, there's very little to be gained by eating these in terms of nutritional health. So the saturated fat compared to regular beef might not be that much different. But if your goal for personal reasons is to get away from your craving for burgers by eating meat alternatives, that's a personal decision. I don't think that these meat alternatives have really created advances in human health. And so for whatever reason you're vegetarian, um, these meat alternatives may or may not serve a purpose.
Eat around the perimeter of the store. Lots and lots of fresh vegetables. Fresh is better, right?
So,
Learn to satisfy your cravings with those items.
you know, we were the health of the nation, the health of the food supply was probably better before all this GMO technology in the sense that, you know, farming was different. People were eating more, a wider variety of homegrown fruits and vegetables and what many of us would like to see is more small scale farming with farms that are helping to regenerate the soil, keeping America's soil, which is a huge natural resource, healthy. The GMO, so small or medium sized farms are much more likely to be rotating crops and keeping the soil healthy. The GMO technology has allowed has facilitated large scale monocultures or monocrops. So miles and miles and miles of corn and soybean. And that's the opposite of regenerative farming practices, which we talked about before. And so if we want our soil to be healthy, then we want to rethink policy around GMO.
It's interesting you bring up the regenerative farming and you bring the soil up because I know that quite a few people that I can see both watching online and in our live studio audience. Maybe one was in our regenerative farming discussion that we had with the chairman of the World Food Bank. And it's a really important conversation to have about our soil being sick. So, what I hear you saying is that it's not the problem that we have is not as much about the genetically modified organisms, it's more about the health of our soil that is causing the chronic illness in our country.
The, so yes, in many ways, the epidemics of diabetes, obesity, and related conditions is a direct result of changes in what we see in the grocery store. And genetically modified corn, soybeans, and oils have fueled changes in what we see in the grocery store and also have fueled, changes in farming practices that are bad for our soil. So those none of those things are good for America or the health of its citizens.
So, I mean, it's just like the genetically modified, the GMOs ended up leading to the soil becoming sick, which ultimately has led to us becoming sick.
Yeah, in many ways, so GMO farming um, has led to increases in the amount of herbicide being used. So you can dump a lot of weed killer into the soil to kill the weeds because now the crops have been bred genetically to be resistant to weed killers, also known as herbicides. And so use of herbicides has really increased, and that's not necessarily, a good thing for the health of the soil and for, crop diversity. Um, However, genetically, GMO farming has in some cases led to reduced use of pesticides. These are basically bug killers. And so there's been maybe a mixed effect on bug killing chemicals, but overall, we're using more and more chemicals on our farmland because of these, evolution in the way, farming is practiced. So none of this is really good for our soil or for obesity and diabetes.
If you have any questions for Dr. Dansinger on this topic or have any burning questions at all, make sure to go ahead and raise your hand or put it in chat and I'll get to you. It looks like Douglas is ready to ask you a question. He's in our live studio audience. Douglas, go ahead and unmute and ask Dr. Dansinger your question.
Thank you for joining us again. Great topic. My question is, I was wondering, so if we're at the store, HEB, Walmart, all the different grocery stores out there, and we're looking at the package, and they put all these wonderful pictures and signs, and they say meat free, eat this, eat that. But how do I, as a consumer, look at even my fruit? So we had that program, and I've been talking to ranchers around here trying to find food that they were talking about. Talked to three of them. They
Right?
never even heard of regenerative farming, never even heard of it. Don't even know what it is. So, how, as a consumer, I'm pre diabetic, I'm on the cusp. But as a consumer, how do I look at what I'm buying and know that it doesn't have all this GMOs and all the bad stuff, and that even like the fruit wasn't raised with all this stuff sprayed on it?
Yeah, so very little of the fruit in the United States is related to GMO. So, yeah, oranges, for example, or strawberries, blueberries, peaches. These are not genetically modified crops. They've been, bred, over many decades to be, sweet and beautiful and delicious, but not genetically engineered in the GMO sense. So it really is mainly, products that use, corn or soy or canola that is genetically modified. But there are labels that are used that say does not contain any GMO ingredients. You could look for that. Or buying organic probably reduces the chances of that something's been genetic, using GMO practices or have, you know, so much pesticide on it. And so um, there are groups that want more aggressive labeling of non-GMO, and then the food industries, of course, do not want labels saying GMO on there. But I would say think of it this way. There's a lot of foods that are just obviously unhealthy. These are the ones likely to have GMO ingredients. And if you're eating fruits and vegetables and fish and shellfish or pasture raised animals that aren't
Like,
eating that aren't eating, soy, that aren't eating, fed corn, soy and corn, but instead grass, then that's healthiest for your body, and that's what you want to really focus on. So
So
avoiding.
grass fed, grass finish if you're going in that direction
Yeah,
for
mhm.
the meat, the livestock.
Yeah,
Douglas,
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 does
did
that
you
help
want to
you?
comment further?
like I eat a lot of chicken, so trying to find chicken that is grass and it like with the eggs in that. So
I don't think chickens eat grass. What do you look for in that, Dr. Danziger, for chickens?
Yeah, it all depends on what the chickens are being fed. And so some chickens are free range, right? They're out there eating seeds and insects, and they've got, places where they can hunt up what their natural diet would be versus if they're just getting fed if they're just getting fed unnatural food. And so we do have eggs that are, basically pasture raised. They're eating seeds and bugs and natural food. So you want the health profile of meat that where the animal is eating wild natural food rather than farm raised food is your body can tell the difference whether you're eating a chicken that's raised on healthy versus farmed food. That
Mhm.
your body can tell the difference.
So free range on that one. And Julie
Yeah.
was asking about fruit. Julie, do you want to unmute and ask about fruit and diabetes, or do you want me to ask?
Oh, I can ask. Yeah, I was just wondering because I really do not eat any sugar other than fruit,
Yes.
but I know that some types of fruits are better for people with concern about diabetes than others. What are the ones that are the best, or how do we know the difference?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so many nutrition experts would advocate the idea of figuring out which fruits raise blood sugar the most, and they use something called the glycemic load or the glycemic index to sort of rank different fruits. And so berries, strawberries, blueberries, raspberries, berries probably have the lowest, the least damaging, the the least likely to raise blood sugar as much on average. And melon, stone fruits like peaches or plums, um, citrus fruits like oranges are probably cherries would be another example of fruits that are lower on the glycemic load. Um, pine on the high end of the glycemic load is probably bananas and pineapple. Most fruits are sort of in the middle. Um, Fruit is pretty good for weight loss. And so, for people who are looking to improve their type 2 diabetes through weight loss, fruit often helps more than it harms. So, fruit
Is
is a
it
mix.
okay to have an occasional banana? And I'll tell you why I ask that is because I have a half a avocado every
Hmm.
morning with
Yes.
my breakfast, and sometimes they're not ripe. Well, if you put unripe avocados in a brown paper bag with bananas, it'll ripen them.
Yes.
And so I always have to get a banana, but I don't want to just throw it out. So is it okay to have like maybe one banana a week, or should I just try and get ripe avocados?
The short answer to your question is For most people, one banana a week is perfectly fine. In my own patients, I rarely, ask people to avoid bananas. I wouldn't eat two a day, but for most of my patients, a few bananas a week is perfectly welcome because I'm more interested in having them avoid starchy foods like white rice, white bread, white pasta, and if I can get them to eat fruit instead of cakes or other sweets. I mean, I don't want to necessarily take away all their sweet. I just want their sweet to come from fruit rather than from cookies and cakes and other stuff. So the fruit question is complicated, but the short answer to your question is yeah, one banana a week is not a big deal for most people. When it comes to avocados, you always want to buy them in advance. Give them enough days sitting on the counter until they're ripe, and then put them in the fridge, and they'll stay good for about 5 days. So I
You're
always
right.
green avocados on the counter waiting, and I've got ripe avocados in the fridge ready to use. And so you don't really need bananas to ripen your avocado. You just need to have thought about it in advance with enough time so that
Right.
you've always got unripe and ripe avocados in your kitchen.
Hey,
And I love
thank you.
avocados because they're great. Instead of a banana in a smoothie, the avocado can make your smoothie incredibly thick and creamy. So just a little tip in
Healthy,
case you're a
healthy fat.
smoothie
Yeah.
lover. So I have one more question for you because I know you have to wrap up here. So for, to wrap up the entire conversation on GMOs, I know every time I go after foods, I always look for the non-GMO label. How important is that? And is it something that's just become trendy, or is there real meaning to it for people as they're doing the shopping?
So I don't really buy into that philosophy. What I buy into is the idea that GMO foods are in all sorts of ultra processed snacks and fast foods. And what you want is to focus on fruits and vegetables and healthy proteins, including fish and shellfish, and pasture raised lean meats rather than all the foods that end up in processed, all the GMO, all the snack foods that are loaded with genetically modified corn, soybean oil, sugar from sugar beets, and high fructose corn syrup. And so we already know the ways to eat healthily, perimeter of the store. And so I don't think it's about looking for a label that says whether something has GMO or not. Just stay away from all the ultra processed foods that are tempting and delicious but bad for us. That's the way I think about it.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Dr. Danziger. That was a really interesting discussion. I know it's a topic that always comes up, but I've learned a lot and I really appreciate you being here. Wondering what topic we are going to do next week. I had some ideas for you. So before we go, do you want to throw out a couple of ideas and see what you think about which one sticks?
Oh boy, you caught me off guard here. So
I have some good ones.
good.
So
I think it goes best when you pick the topics.
well, one of the things I ended up picking up, bought a container of Morton salt, and I know we're supposed to limit our salt anyway. And we have talked about the different types of salt that's out there, and that's probably not the best one. But on the label and the ingredients, I noticed a little surprise in there. What do you think that might be?
In the salt?
Dextrose,
Oh,
sugar.
there's sugar in the salt?
There was sugar in the salt. So I thought it might be interesting to maybe do an entire episode on where sugar may be hiding,
Oh,
um,
mhm.
which could be fun. Or number two, we're focusing this week and next week with our nurse practitioner on ways in which, or foods that help reduce the claudication. So things like spicy mustard or pickle juice or quinone and tonic water or whatever it might be, We're going to talk about that this week. And then next week, we're going to talk about blood boosting foods and drink. But I thought it'd be great to have different perspectives, from different people, and different people will come on and watch at different times, because that is literally the number one topic in the group when it comes to food. Are there any foods that will boost my blood? And number two, reduce the claudication. So that might be a topic for even 2 weeks as well. So I'll leave it to you. What do you think?
Sure. Where's the sugar hiding? Let's get into
Okay,
that.
let's do it. That's exciting. So next week, right here, we're going to be talking about where your sugar might be lurking that you may not even know about. So you definitely want to join us next week, right here, same bat time, same bat channel. Make sure you do like this video, subscribe to our channels over on YouTube, youtube.com/@ the @ Michael Dansinger, MD. And you can also subscribe to the Global PAD Association's channel if you want this type of content and more. That is youtube.com /@ the weight of my heart. Thanks so much.